nice. Well, with that, I'm going to give you a quick history of Ste Genevieve before we get started. Ste Genevieve was founded in 1735, right on the banks of Mississippi, 2 miles south of here. In 1785, there's a major flood that came through. The waters were so deep, all you can see with the rooftops and the chimneys sticking up out of the water. As the travelers would come up and down the river, they would tie off on the chimneys and rooftops to be able to come ashore. Now, as waters receded, the town fathers decided to move in this location that we're at right now. The town was founded by French Canadian settlers that came from Canada down through Louisiana and came up this way. You'll see a lot of French influence here, and a lot of the Creole influence here also. Now, Ste Genevieve is built on a bedrock of limestone, and we believe in the paranormal community that limestone is like a spiritual battery. It gives a spirit something to manifest from. We also believe that running water is also a spiritual battery. We have the mighty Mississippi, we have the North and South Gabourey rivers. So we're surrounded by that energy source. A lot of the buildings that you see here that we'll be going by, a lot of buildings are built on a limestone foundation. Some of them are built out of limestone, so some houses have a little more power than the other ones. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to make a bit of a trek up to the cemetery. We should be able to get in there before we close. So we're going to head straight up the road here. Watch the sidewalk and watch the road. This is the oldest settled cemetery this side of the Mississippi. It was founded in 1787. In 1885, it was declared a health hazard here. In 1897, it was actually closed. The reason it was declared a health hazard is when they would come in to open up a new grave site, they would disturb 1 to 3 other grave sites at that time. And they thought, there's just too many people here, so we need to close it. Now, if you, well, there's so many headstones, or so many bodies buried here. If you count the headstones on the hills here, you're going to count anywhere from 300 to 350 headstones. But it's estimated that there's anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 souls buried within these grounds. A lot of the headstones here are built out of the local stone, the limestone. So over the years, they've disintegrated and they've gone away. So we don't know exactly how many are here. At one time, there was a fire in the courthouse, and we lost a lot of records pertaining to the cemetery and a lot of other things here. So we don't know exactly how many people are buried here. When the fire happened, a lot of the townsfolk, they came up and they tried to remember how many people were buried here. You know, their grandmothers and aunts and uncles and all. If you saw the sign out there, there's a preservation society that's working on the cemetery. At one time, they had a ground-penetrating radar company come in, and they checked the whole grounds here. Everywhere that you see grass that you guys are standing on, there's bodies buried underneath there. The only place that's not buried is where this walkway is in this area is right here. So that's why we believe there's so many buried. Now the cemetery is divided into 3 different sections. We've got the Catholic, the Protestant, the Lutheran, and then the Odd Fellows are buried in that depression over there called the Swell.
I'm really surprised they wouldn't put together even a death.
Good question. The reason they're called the Odd Fellows is anyone that they didn't know their religion, they were buried in the swale. That included the local Indians, the indigenous Indians here, the slaves that were kept at that time, or anybody traveling through town that happened to die for whatever reason, they were buried in the swale. Now we don't know why they would have the slaves buried in the swale, other than their burial rites were different than the Christian burial rites. They're very loud and boisterous, a lot of emotion, and the Christian burial rites are very somber and quiet, so we think maybe that had something to do with it. We're not sure. Now we believe a grave without a headstone tends to let the spirits wander, and they tend to wander quite freely in here. Now there's a spirit that's been seen quite often. She comes from this tree behind us. She'll walk up actually to that grave right there. She'll disappear into the ground. They said that if you stand here long enough, if you're lucky enough, you'll get to see her repeat that process. We consider that a residual haunting. Now the entity that we do see, we think we know her identity. That grave belonged to Dr. Fenwick. Now Dr. Fenwick used to be a surgeon. He lived in that building right there as you walk by it. He lived here in the 1830s. He was a surgeon, only surgeon here in town. He died of a gunshot. That gunshot was because of a duel. Now, Dr. Fenwick had a younger brother, Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a very avid gambler. He happened to be gambling one night with a lawyer, and he was caught cheating. The lawyer called him out on it. Ezekiel wanted to fight for his honor, so he challenged him to a duel. The lawyer would not fight him because he didn't consider him a gentleman. So his brother, Dr. Fenwick, stepped up for his honor. They decided to go ahead and fight. They went out to the Mississippi River. There's an island out there. They chose their weapons. They walked their paces. They turned. They fired. Now, Dr. Fenwick, being a surgeon, he wasn't very proficient with a weapon, so he missed. His opponent hit his mark, shot him in the stomach, but it didn't kill him right on the spot. They brought him back to his house, placed him in his parlor, and he proceeded to die there. But before he died, he said he wanted to be buried here in the cemetery, but he wanted his gravesite to be pointing directly towards his front porch. If you look at it, it points directly to his front porch. That's the only one of the gravesites that was intentionally placed out of line with the rest. Now, Dr. Fenwick, he had a wife, Julia, and they also had a 9-year-old son. Their 9-year-old son's name was Zenon, and he was very upset that he knew his father was going to die in a short time. He watched his father die, and they buried him here. A few months later, Zenon, he passed away also. He contracted cholera. They had a very large outbreak here. He contracted that, and he's also buried in the same grave with his father. Now, Julia, at that point, she became upset with Sainte-Geneviève. She decided to move away, and she lived away for 6 to 8 years, and she moved back into Sainte-Geneviève. She did not move back into the same house. She lived elsewhere. When she passed away, she was also buried with her family. Now, the reason we believe it was Julia that walks that path and disappears is because she was a very dominant, very headstrong woman. We have reports of. So we think that she had a lot of emotion when she lost her family so quickly and so tragically that maybe she was down here being very sorrowful in that, and maybe that imprinted on the ground. We've had other apparitions appear. One walked against the fence there up against the road. A lot of the local folks in the evenings will come out and walk. There's been reports that they're walking along there and they look in the cemetery and they see a gentleman in 1800s dress, in the suit and the hat and everything, and all of a sudden he disappears. Now, when I first started the tour here, I used to do a character that's called the Grave Digger. I'd bring the group up and I'd stand here and wait, and I'd talk about the cemetery as I am now. This one night I was up here waiting. It was real hot that night. I was just sweating buckets. I was actually standing right here waiting. All of a sudden I got real cold. I thought, well, maybe I got dehydration setting in. But then it dawned on me, well, I'm in the cemetery in the middle of the night. So I decided to try a little test. So I took a step sideways. I was back into the burning heat. I stepped back over to where I was standing. I was in this ice cold embrace. And whenever a spirit goes to manifest itself, it can cause a cold spot because it's pulling that energy in at that point. And maybe I had a spirit trying to manifest on me. So at that point I said, thanks for the AC, and hang around as long as you can. Lasted for about 10 minutes and then it dissipated. But it happened like 3 other times as I was up here waiting. It wouldn't last as long, but I could tell someone was here because I get a little bit of AC. Now, when I first started doing the tours this year, I brought a group up at night, was up at the front gate, and I was telling my stories. A lady, she stepped next to me, on the other side of me to take some pictures of the headstone. And when she did, she caught an apparition that was crouched down next to the wall. All you can see is the hands and the face. Looks like somebody was praying. It's on my Facebook page. You can look it up, and you see a person. It looks like somebody's praying like that, and you can see the body of the apparition. It's real dark, but you can't see the stones behind it. But something was there. I don't know exactly what it was. And when I was telling the story of the lady in white a couple weeks ago, I had a lady do that to me again. She stepped around me, took a picture of the headstones, and in the picture that she got, there's you can see a person in white just standing there looking directly at her. So we randomly get apparitions appearing to us, mostly here in the cemetery. Now there's a tragedy that happened out on the river. There's a Dr. Franklin II, the steamship was steaming upriver, got about 2 miles north of us. All of a sudden there's a loud explosion. And it's so loud they said it rattled windows here in town. The townsfolk, they realized what had happened. They went down to the river to offer assistance. What had happened was the boiler exploded and just leveled the boat. Some people were thrown in the river. The ones in the river, some of them survived, some of them were killed outright. Those who did not survive the blast are brought up here. They were buried in the swale. There's a small plaque that commemorates that tragedy. And there's a legend that kind of goes along with that. If you come through here during Halloween time, you look down on the swale, you see 2 little girls down there playing. You'll be down there playing with them next year. We think that kind of relates to Dr. Franklin too, because their families going up north when that tragedy happened. Now, whenever we can't get in the cemetery, we're usually up at the front gate. At that time, Ethan, he'll take random pictures. And this one time he took a picture of that tree there. And there's an orb. It's a very bright white orb. And we zoomed in on it. And it's in the shape of a dove. The same kind of dove like the Catholic Church uses in their hymnals. I zoomed in closer to it, and it kept its sharp image. But usually orbs don't. They get blurry. That's one of the most striking ones that we've caught. Now, you can't come here during the day and walk through here. At night, they won't let us in because you can see the ground's real uneven. It can get very treacherous. We don't want nobody to fall and get hurt. Now, the only marble headstone that we do have in here is up on the hill there. That belongs to Odile Pratt Ballet and Felix Ballet. Now, Felix Ballet, he passed away long before the cemetery was closed, and Odile outlived him. They closed the cemetery before she was able to join her husband, and she was worried she would not be able to spend the rest of eternity with him. So she donated a large sum of money to the city, to the town, to the building of the Catholic Church, and she donated a large tract of land outside of town for the new cemetery. At that point, when she passed away, she was placed with her husband. They erected the only marble headstone here. Now, if you notice, some of the headstones are square, kind of look like a sarcophagus. That's some of the influence that they brought up from Louisiana, because there they have to bury everybody above ground. Everybody here is buried below. If you notice on some of those headstones, it's real hard to see because it's made out of limestone. They've weathered away, so they're very delicate and they're very protected. Yeah, they just put them on top as a kind of elaborate headstone.
And it's so for 3 bodies in there.
I believe they would put them in caskets. I don't know exactly how they did it, but if they were in caskets and they had to bury other ones in there, dug them deeper. Yeah, something in there. So if you guys want to take a few pictures before we head on out, go ahead and feel free.
This is fun.
They're mostly buried in the bottom. Some of the plaques are on the hillside. we'll wait for everybody to get up here so I don't have to yell. All right, we're at the Gibor Valley House. This building was built in 1806. It's without the clapboard siding on it, it's a vertical log cabin design. It's a very French design of building log cabins. What it is the logs stand actually up on end instead of laying flat. There's actually 3 of them here in Sainte-Geneviève that's on the National Register. This is the second, or one of the 2 that's on the tour tonight. You can tour this house during the day. They'll take you through there and tell you about the family and their lives and everything like that. I'm not going to do that so much. I'm going to tell you ghost stories. Yeah, it's a fascinating house. Now, the Gibor family actually built this house and they lived in this house for about 100 years. The family, they moved out and they sold it to another family of musicians. That's all we know is they were musicians. They lived here for a short time and then they vacated the building. And it sat vacant for a while until the Valet family came in and bought it. Now, it's purchased by Jules and Anne-Marie Valet. When they moved in, they had to gut the whole house and rehab it before they could move in. When they moved in, Anne-Marie was charged with the caretaking of the cemetery where we just came from. What she would do is whenever a storm would come through, she would send her people down after the storm to walk through and pick up any pieces of headstone that happened to break off. Now, she didn't want to throw it in the trash like it didn't mean anything. She had them brought up and placed around her flower gardens in the back. Now we think that when she started doing that is when the activity actually started to be very active here in the house. When Anne-Marie and Jules lived here, they would often be sitting in one room, real quiet reading or whatever, and then they would start to hear whispering, low talking in another room. They'd get up to go investigate. Nobody would be in. Sometimes they would be sitting in the kitchen or another room. They'd hear some furniture move in an adjacent room. They'd get up, go check it, thinking maybe it's one of the dogs, getting in there. And they go and check, but nothing's been disturbed. Now in 1940, Jules was in his room. He had a room upstairs. He was recovering from eye surgery. That night he was laying in bed, his face in the wall, and he was just about to sleep. All of a sudden he felt a tap on his shoulder, and he felt a cool breeze in the room. He thought maybe it was his wife or one of the maids come up to talk to him. As he rolled over, he saw 3 gentlemen standing there looking at him. He reported that they had a very pleasing look on their face. They looked to be of Spanish descent, and they had heavy woolen suits on. When he looked down, as they got to their waist, he noticed they had no legs. At that point, they promptly disappeared. Now, he rolled over and tried to get back to sleep the best he could. In the morning, he let his wife know, and she took it pretty nonchalantly because they've already experienced different things here in the on the main floor. Now, they were avid travelers. They used to travel quite a bit when they were alive. They traveled around the world. So when you tour the house, you see some of their artifacts in there. Now, they lived here until Jules, he had passed away. After his funeral, Anne-Marie went up to his room to collect all his personal effects. She said as she walked into the room, she opened the door and walked in, she was greeted by a deep guttural growl. She didn't run away in fear as most people would. She stood her ground, actually enraged. She said, this is my house. You cannot stay in my house. You have to leave my house. And with that, she slammed the door and she left. And she came back the next day. She said she walked in there and it just felt normal. She was not greeted by that growl. When Anne-Marie passed away, she was buried up in the cemetery. At that point, the Valet family lived here until the 1980s, and then they donated the house to the city as a museum. At that point, they had to rehab the whole house again, and they brought it back to when the Valet family just moved in. Now, when they started it as a museum, there's a large tree in the back courtyard. It has a flower garden. They had a worker back there. He's putting in flowers and mulching around the tree. He said that as he was working on the ground, he noticed a lady standing next to him. He He said he looked up at her, she smiled at him, and said, "You're doing a wonderful job." And she turned, walked out the side gate, closed it, and he never saw her again. Now he finished what he was doing. He came back into the house and he was going to give him the ticket for his work. He walked in, there's 2 tour guides there. He says, "Where's the other lady at? I wanted to see, I finished the garden." They said, "Well, we're the only ones here. What did she look like?" He started to describe this lady that he saw. When he started to do that, one tour guide recognized who he was talking to. She grabbed him by the elbow, gently walked him into the front room and turned him. As he looked up, he saw the lady he was describing. That was Anne Marie. She had stopped by to approve what they were doing. The tour guide, she also reported that when they started this museum, she actually lived here in the servants' quarters in the back there above the kitchen. She said whenever she would retire for the day, she'd go to play her record player. She had an old Nicola wind-up record player. Whenever she would play it, it would never play right. It would skip, or it would play fast, or it would play slow. At one time, she went and had it checked out to see if it was broken. The repairman said it plays beautifully. I don't know what the problem is. When she eventually moved out, got her own house here in town, first night she was there, she wound it up to see if it would play all right, and she said it played beautifully that night. So we don't know why it wouldn't play here, except maybe they didn't like the music. Now the same tour guide, she gave me a private tour when I first started the tours here, and she took me around, showed me the house, told me stories of the family, and some ghost stories. Well, during the tour, she took me upstairs to show me the upstairs, and when she got me to the top of the stairs, I stopped and I noticed I could smell maple syrup. I thought it was kind of odd to smell something like that in the building that's been closed up and not lived in for a number of years. Now I called her over and she smelled it and it dissipated. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he and his family, he came up here and they took the tour, and he experienced the same thing when he got up to the top of the stairs. Now he told me his story before I told him mine, so we don't know, the significance of that, except that when the Valet family lived here, they had a son, and he moved upstairs also. Maybe it might be his spirit or something. Now the house right next door to us, he keeps an eye out on the building when it's closed up. When they first started the tours here in the house, one night he noticed that the lights were on upstairs and they should be off. Now this concerned him. He thought maybe somebody had broke in. He came over, he let himself in. He checked the first floor, everything was fine. He made his way upstairs and he realized the light had been turned on. So he turned it on, checked, nothing was out of order or anything. So he's mentioned that whenever he notices that the light's been turned on up there, he'll wait. And sometimes it'll go off on its own, so he won't bother with it. If it stays on, then he'll come over and check it. Now we've caught some apparitions out of that picture. Even he's taken some pictures when we're doing tours. There's a gentleman that likes to stand in this window right above us there and look out at us. He's got a cowboy hat on, he's an older gentleman, and there's nothing up there that resembles a human. So we don't know exactly what that is. Now one of the tour guides that worked here, she reported one night that she was closing the house up, and Anne Marie's room is on the first floor. It's on the last window here on the porch here. That's the last room she would check. Now, this one night she did that. She checked the room, turned the light on, opened the door, and looked in there. Everything was fine. She closed the door, and by the time she got to the front door there, she could hear a lot of commotion in the room. So she ran back thinking somebody was hiding back there, and she missed them, and they're vandalizing. She runs back, she opens the door, flips the light on. Now, everything that was on Anne Marie's vanity was neatly placed on the bed, same exact position. This startled her, but she's familiar with all the ghost stories here in town, so it didn't really bother her that much. She went ahead and put everything back, and then the next night she decided, well, as she checked the room, well, there could be somebody hiding in here, playing games on it. So after she checked the room, she walked real slow to the front porch. She got about halfway there and she heard commotion again. So she went running back, flung the door open, turned the light on, and Charity's vanity was moved in the center of the room with the hand mirror pointed face up. And it looked like it was just set there because it was slowly turning, she said. So she put it back, and she left. And the next night she told me, she said, I know somebody's messing with me. So that night she decided to wait outside the door. After she checked it, she waited no more than 10 to 15 seconds. All of a sudden she heard this commotion. She flings the door open, flips the light on, all the clothes on the bed's all messed up. So she took a hint from Anne Marie. She said, well, if you guys want to live in filth, that's fine. I won't clean this room anymore. She slams the door and she leaves. She comes back the next day. She had to make the bed. But that night when she checked it, the room, she waited outside the door for about 10-15 minutes and no commotion. She opened the door to check and there's nothing wrong. It's never happened again. So we don't know what had happened. Why?
Brave. I've been heading down the street.
Like I said, you can tour this house. It's a great tour to check it out. And they'll take you in the back and they'll show you the headstone pieces around the flower gardens. And there's one headstone back there that belongs to Anne Marie and Jules. It belonged to their dog. When he passed away, they didn't want to bury him and forget about him, so they had a headstone with it. So that's kind of neat. I'm sorry? Any questions or anything? With that, we're going to head on down the street to our next locations. Genevieve Winery. Sainte-Geneviève Winery, this building was originally built around 1901 or so. It was a single-family home. During World War II, it was converted into the first hospital here in Sainte-Geneviève. The men and women from the war, they'd come back here, they would recuperate, and then they'd go on about their business. After that, it was converted back into a single-family home. And at one point, a gentleman and his wife, as a young couple, they bought the house. They raised their family here. His wife passed away before he did, and he ended up living here by himself in his later years. In his later years, he became bedridden. He couldn't move around very well by himself. So he had a nurse, a local nurse, come in and take care of him during the day. And she'd put him to bed at night, and she would go ahead and leave and lock the house up. Well, this one night she did just that. She put him to bed, locked the house up, and she went on home. Now, about an hour later, he said that he heard some commotion going on downstairs. So he thought maybe somebody was breaking into his house, so he was going to go down and investigate and find out what's going on. As he made his way out of his room to the top of the stairs, he was startled. He looked down and saw a lady in white looking directly back at him. This scared him so bad that he made his way back to his room, locked the door, and got into bed and waited for morning. Now in the morning, his nurse showed up. He went and recounted what had happened that night. And she took it real easy. She didn't get very upset about it. She thought, well, her reply was, that must have been my sister-in-law. Her sister-in-law worked here during the war as a nurse. And she ended up being a nurse here in town for a while. When she passed away, they think that maybe she came back here because she enjoyed working with the soldiers at that time. Now, if you come up here during the day and sample their wines, there's a good chance that you'll actually see her on the stairs. There's been reports of her walking up and down the stairs or standing there looking directly at the people sampling the wines. Now, 2 years ago when we were doing the tours, we had a police officer actually stop us one night and tell a story that he experienced here. About 3 o'clock in the morning, burglar alarm went off. He came down here, parked in front, let himself in the building, and he checked the first floor. Everything was as it should be. He went upstairs, and at that time they had it set up as the hospital it was back in the day. He went around to each room and checked them. When he came to one of the front rooms up here, said he opened the door, this dark figure walked right in front of him, followed by a cold blast of air. He said at that point, he pirouetted on the spot, made a hasty retreat down the front stairs, came out of that building, he doesn't remember locking it, got in his cruiser and backed up to the apartment and reported what had happened. Now, whenever the burglar alarm goes off anymore, they'll send the new guy and they won't tell him, or they'll draw straws to see who has to come down. Our next location is directly behind us. It's a lot closer than the last one. That building is known here in town as the Stagger House. Now, the Stagger House is operated as a bed and breakfast, a boarding house, or a hotel throughout the years. It's always operated as that. Currently, right now, it's owned by a single family. It's a single family home right now. There's some tragedies that we know that have happened here. There's a gentleman that operated this building back in the 80s. He operated as a murder mystery theater and a boarding house, or a bed and breakfast. And he did that for quite some time until the local folk here, they noticed a change in his personality. He became very depressed, very distraught. At one point, they noticed a lot of his friends didn't see him for 3 days. His maid became concerned because he was at work, and she came up to check on him. She went through the house thinking maybe he fell and got hurt and couldn't get to a phone to contact anybody. She went through the whole house, didn't find him, went to one of the back buildings, and there she found him. He had secured the rope to the ceiling, placed it around his neck and hung himself. Now, we don't know exactly why he did that, but that had happened there. There's reports of a young boy that had died in a hotel. We think that he had fallen down one of the front staircase and maybe injured himself and died on the spot. Yeah, please, have a seat. At one time, neighbors across the street that were working out of their shop, they had some friends. They were over here at the winery one night. They was looking at the winery, hoping to see some kind of activity or something. As they were standing here, they noticed there's a gentleman standing in the front doorway there. At that time, they had was operating as a bed and breakfast, so they thought maybe it was just a guest. They waved to him. He didn't respond or anything. He just stood there and stared at him. And then they noticed almost immediately they didn't see him in the front door there. They saw him upstairs in one of the front windows. Him and his wife were getting ready for bed. They thought it was quite odd that he just all of a sudden appeared there. They saw him get ready for bed, and they turned the light out. The next day, they contacted the operator of the bed and breakfast and said, "We hope we didn't disturb your guest. You were outside in front talking and that, and we didn't want to disturb him." He said, the owner said, "Well, we didn't have anybody booked that night, so there wasn't nobody in the building." So they contacted the owner of the building, thinking maybe they had some friends staying there. The owner of the building said, "No, we don't have anybody staying there either." So we think that was one of the former guests that is still occupying the building. Now, we got to do an investigation there a couple years ago. We took a bunch of people like you out on a tour. They actually booked a room in the bed and breakfast. That night after the tour, when we got back, we started an investigation. One of the EVPs that we did catch was in the front parlor. I was sitting there with one of the guests, and he had an EM meter sitting next to him. Now, that registers any electromagnetic interference. Most spirits, when they're trying to manifest, it'll register that LP. Now, it started beeping, and the gentleman he asked, there's a young boy here, the one that died here, you hear making the light go off. And it went off again. And then he asked a few more questions, but we didn't get any reply. As he was asking that question, I had a recorder going, and when he asked that question, you could hear a young boy in a giggly voice say, "Yes, I am," as this clear as day. Now, we had a guest investigator with us, and he was in the left front window over there, the door, that was the office to the bed and breakfast. He was in there, he had a spirit box, and that scans through radio stations. He had his set backwards, so it scanned backwards really fast. He was getting replies in German. His equipment's not supposed to be programmed with German. He speaks it rudimentary, so he could pick out the yeses and nos to his answers. He got a few of those, and then that was it. Now we do have a story from one of the maids that actually worked there. In 2008, the gentleman, he ran it as a murder mystery theater, also in a bed and breakfast. Well, this one night, they had a bunch of guests check in, and the owner, he got everybody together, took them down to Audubon's for a drink, and when he did that, his maid came back and she went through the building. She started on the 3rd floor and started hiding clues in each of the rooms for the murder mystery. She got down to the 2nd floor. She had 2 more rooms to go. She was in the second to last room, and she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. She thought, oh no, they're back early. You know, they're going to bust me and ruin the surprise. So she went and hid in one of the bathrooms. These 2 rooms are joined by a bathroom. She hid in the bathroom and she listened. She could hear the footsteps go up the stairs, down the hall, then up to the 3rd floor. She thought, great, you know, I got 1 more room. She went into the last room. She hit her clues. She noticed that the door was closed. She didn't think nothing of it. She went to turn the doorknob and the door was locked. Now this building has the old skeleton key locks, the ones that you have to have the key to turn and latch it. She thought, well, maybe one of the guests was messing with it and locked it up, you know, and just left it. She went back to the original room that she came in. She said, I know I left the door open. She said, as I walked up to that door, she noticed it was closed. She turned the doorknob and it was locked. So this scared her pretty good. So she thought, well, maybe, you know, I'm getting scared, I'm getting confused because the rooms were identical at the time. So she went back to the first door she tried. That door was still locked. Then she went back to the second door and that one was locked. So this really scared her. So she went back to the bathroom, she sat down, and she was thinking to herself, well, if I can't get out of here, I'm going to climb out one of those windows on the front porch and just jump off and get out of here. So she said a couple prayers under her breath. She went back to the first room that she came in, and she turned the doorknob and unlatched. She opened the door, come running down the front stairs, got to the front door, onto the front porch. At that time, the guests were coming back. So she kept her cool. She let everybody in the building. The last one up was the owner, and she caught him. She pulled him off the side and said, man, that's a bunch of dirty fools. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, you came up there and locked those doors on me and scared the pee out of me. I don't appreciate it. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. We just got back. And she said, well, this building has a mind of its own, and I won't be in tomorrow. And she quit right on the spot. We have seen different activity in this building. One night I was out here giving tours, and the window there on the left, where the lamp is, they were doing construction. They were selling the building. And we noticed that the light had come on, and you could see the fan, ceiling fan in there slowly turning. As far as I know, is when we walked up here to tell stories, it wasn't on. So, now the building that we were in there, the young man that was with me, Ethan, he's got a bedroom towards the front of the building there. He says now and again, he'll be woken up in the middle of the night with having dog food thrown on. That's happened quite a few times. He thought, well, maybe his mom and dad just messed with him. One night, it happened to have dog food thrown right on him. It woke him up, and as he woke up, he noticed his dad was walking by. And he called him, hey, Dad, you throw this on me? And his dad comes back and no, I just let the dogs out. He comes back and looked at it. He goes, Ethan said, well, turn my light on. You know, turn his light on in his room, and he looks at all the dog food thrown in the room. He goes, well, that's kind of messed up. He goes, well, I'm going to bed. So he went on to bed. Now, that's happened to him quite a few times. A couple weeks ago, we did a tour, and he went with me. Before the tour, he went up to his room to get something, and he came back down. We did the tour. After we left, he went up there to go to bed. He said there's dog food laid in a line on his bed, and it's all over his dresser, and nobody had been up there. Dog food. Not poop. Dog food. Now, in his mother's room, she's reported that she's got a closet door that doesn't like to stay closed. During the night, if she has to get up to use the restroom, she'll do that. She'll come back, and if she notices the door is open, she'll close it. This one night, she happened to get up. She went to the restroom, noticed the door was open. She closed it, came back, and was still closed. She got into bed, and she was playing with her phone, and all of a sudden, she noticed the doorknob had just slowly turned, and the door opened on its own. Now, this happens to her quite frequently. At one point, she decided to start trying to block it closed, thinking maybe, you know, it's just the old house and it's just swinging open. She's put chairs in front of it, and it's found its way open. She's put baskets of clothes in front of it, and it's found its way open. Now she just leaves it open so whatever's in there can come and go as it wants. She's reported a lot of other activity in there. When she's in the shop waiting for customers to come in, there's stairs to the basement that are fairly close. She can hear footsteps go up and down, and the doorknob turn. And as far as she knows, it hasn't come upstairs yet. Any questions or anything? They really haven't had any trouble with it. At one time, it was originally a bakery. Then after the bakery, it was turned into a photography studio. And the photographer had a dark room downstairs. And they think that's his ghost that is walking up and down there, because he actually passed away in the building. Any questions? They also had a large farm. They raised crops here in town. They were one of the largest slave owners here in town when they lived here. So they had a lot of, just to show up, they had a lot of money. Now the building here is one of the houses that you can tour. It's easy to go in there and tour it. If you ask them, is this building haunted, they'll tell you point blank no. They're trying to push the issue with it, they don't like to talk about any kind of paranormal activity that happens in this building. At one time they talked freely about it, but a lot of the tour guides that would come in to work, as soon as they would get here, they would have headaches, they'd be nauseous all day. As soon as they would leave and go home, all the feelings would go away. So they decided, well, maybe if we quit talking about it, then maybe it'll go away. And they did. They quit talking about it. They wouldn't talk about anything. And then about a month later, they noticed that all the feeling was gone. Nobody had headaches or nausea, and the house just felt like a regular house. But we do have some stories about this building. Now, Odile, in her later years, she would spend a lot of time in her bedroom upstairs. Her window faces towards the river, and it was reported as she would be up there watching over the street and that. So some of the kids would come by, she'd get their attention, she'd throw coins out to them. Now and again, when we walk by the sidewalk there, I'll see coins laying there. There's two reasons for that. Either the town folks are just perpetuating the story, or she's actually throwing them out. Either way, I leave them there, I'll make them. Now there's reports of in her room, whenever they take a group over there, when they would walk into her room, they'd notice that the rocking chair was rocking. As they walked in, it would go ahead and stop. Now they thought, well, it's a very old house, it's over 200 years old, so the floorboard's probably a little creaky in there. Now this would happen now and again. It happened so much that they decided they was going to try and debunk it. They had one of the tour guides wait up in the room as they brought up another group. And when they did this, the rocking chair never moved at all. They did this a number of times trying to catch it. They could never catch it moving on its own. They did report, however, that the rocking chair would tend to move locations on its own. Normally they had the rocking chair facing southeast. Sometimes they come into the room as pointing northeast. Sometimes into the center of the room. Sometimes it would be pointed directly at the door leading into the bedroom. They could never account for this. Nobody would own up to repositioning of the rocking chair. Now we've had people come on the tours, I'm telling my stories, and they'll go ahead and start taking pictures. Usually the sign here with the Maynard Ballet, they would catch an image of a young boy. Sometimes they'll catch him, sometimes an older gentleman with a hat on like I have. Sometimes they'll catch them both together. Now, local artist here, she's a photographer. Comes around different times of the year and takes pictures of the historic home. So this one day, she's come down through here and she had her 8-year-old son. They get right in front of the building here, and she decides she's going to take some pictures. She pulls out her cell phone, and she's going to take some test shots. Only she's got her camera set on first, where it takes a bunch of pictures all at once. As she's taking her pictures, her son starts complaining that his back is hurting, that he wants to leave. He just kind of blows it off as the 8 8-year-old boy just being bored really quick. She takes out a professional camera, she takes a bunch of pictures of the house, and then she finishes and they move on down the street. Now her son kept complaining about his back hurt. She finally gave in. She said, okay, let me look at your back. She pulls the shirt up, down his back with 3 scratches from the shoulder blades to the face. At this point, it startled her quite bad, so she decided to go on, take him home, and take care of him. She did just that, took care of his scratches. She decided to go through her pictures. She went through her professional camera first. All the pictures came out just beautiful. After that, she went through her cell phone, and all the pictures were normal except for one in the center of the first shot. Because out of that window there, she could see this young boy looking at her with a very angry scowl. It was about the same time her son started complaining about his back. We have another report of a local gentleman. He's out about this time of the night. He was walking down through here after dinner. 2 ladies were coming up from Audubon's after they had their dinner. He said when they got closer, they started acting really weird. He said, as I got closer to him, the one stopped and goes, "Oh, you're out walking with Grandpa, isn't that special?" He said he stopped and was trying to, I don't see a boy, what are you guys talking about? He goes, "That young boy there, it's kind of rude to be talking to him like that." He goes, "Ladies, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't see a boy fighting." At that point, he said they turned and they walked as fast as they could away from him. He couldn't catch up to him to find out what they were talking about, but he said he was just out walking by himself. Now we have a report of a young boy who was run over here around 1900. Him and his friends were out in the street. They were playing. Horse and cart comes barreling up the street, and they didn't hear it. The young boy was run over, and he was killed just up the street from them. So we've been thinking that maybe that young boy had some kind of attachment to the building here, and he likes to hang out. Last year, I was giving a tour. I was telling my stories, and my daughter came with me, and she started taking some pictures, and she found a young boy looking out that window there. Has anybody else been on a ghost tour before this one?